Hello. Okay, 1 second now. I'm going to go ahead and invite Mia. Hello, everyone. Welcoming Stephanie, our interpreter, and I'm going to invite our guest Mia on now shortly. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Mia.
Hi.
Thank you so much for taking some time to join us for this conscious conversation.
I'm so glad to be here.
Yay! Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next conscious conversation brought to you by Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. I am super excited to introduce our next featured guest, a dear comrade, a movement mate, and adapted athlete activist and organizer extraordinaire, Mia Ives Rublee. Is it okay, Mia, to just read a quick, I guess, a part of your extensive bio so just folks have a sense of who you are?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Mia is a disabled transracial adoptee who has dedicated her life's work to civil rights activism. She began her journey as an adapted athlete, competing internationally in track, road racing, fencing, and CrossFit. She obtained her master's in social work at UNC Chapel Hill and began working with disabled people to help them find work and independence in their communities at the North Carolina Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services. Mia is best known for founding the Women's March Disability Caucus and organizing the original Women's March on Washington in 2017. Mia has worked with Women's March, Families Belong Together, the March on Climate Change, DC Action Labs, Adoptees for Justice, and numerous other progressive organizations. And Mia most recently started a new role as director of the Disability Justice Project at the Center for American Progress.
Yay.
Woo! So we have a powerhouse with us today. Super excited to this conversation. Thank you again, Mia, for joining us.
I am so glad to be here. Always enjoy chatting with you and working with you. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Mia. So to start us off, a question that we ask all of our guests is this question. So in the spirit of Ella Baker, who are your people?
Who are my people? I would say anybody who is down to get in the weeds and really fight for those most marginalized and those individuals who are often left out of the conversation. So that's who my people are. If you're willing to do that and really stick it out, because it's hard work. I'm down to organize with you.
Yes, you have been a true partner and champion in this struggle for justice. So I can definitely attest to that from personal experience and what I'm able to witness you do in different parts, in different campaigns and with different organizations and communities.
I mean, that's why I'm down with you, man.
I appreciate that, Mia. The feeling is definitely mutual. The second question that we like to ask all of our guests is, when was the last time you felt brave?
So I guess I could go either very literally or just sort of figuratively. I would say as an individual who lives at this sort of multi-marginalized sort of intersectional identity, which is, being disabled, being bi, being a transracial adoptee, being a woman, being Asian American, all of those things require you to be brave at
Mm,
all times. Just
mm,
being in public and being allowed to be you is a brave action in itself. But I guess if you want to go very like literally, I guess the last time I would say that I had to be extremely brave was when I finally just sort of decided to come out publicly as by I'd been questioning for a very long time, and just decided, the heck with it, so I think that was probably the last time, and that was about a year ago. So
Well, congratulations and thank you for sharing that. Was as a follow up to that, was there anything in particular that moved you or made you feel like it was the right moment in that time?
not really. I don't even really remember the impetus really of, I think I had been thinking about it for a long time and was just like tired of just
Mm,
like being in this sort of middle ground, and um had always am trying to figure out sort of who I am and my who my true self is. And so, in trying to live up to those standards, I made the conscious decision to be like, the heck with it, and we'll just go with it. And I will say, like, my when I did it, I had a bunch of just outpouring of love from the community, and my brother gave me a call, which was just like super emotional.
mm,
And he was just like, congratulations. I love you, and, I'm here for you. And that just meant so much to me.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. I believe, Mia, that it's even for me. I believe that coming out is an ongoing process, and I find myself, affirming and reaffirming that I am gay, that I'm queer, in my case, and it's and I people ask me all the time, like, well, why do you always feel the need to like come out or share with people that aspect of your identity? And for me, it's a two things. One, it's a reminder of how far we've come, both as individuals, but as a community, but also how much more we have to do. And if me coming out and me affirming or saying publicly that I am gay or that this is an important part of who I am or an important aspect of my identity, then and that means that more people feel more comfortable, feel more inspired and ready to share and to be their full, authentic, holistic selves, then let that be a practice and let that be something that I'm willing to continue to do. So thank you, because I know that for me that was an important part of me coming out, was knowing that others would be there that shared that same identity, were part of this broader community, were willing to hold me and nurture me along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So let's move into a little bit on the topic of our theme, because the theme for us today is creating space for you and for all, combating ableism and advancing disability justice. Um, and let's just start off with a kind of a question from the top in terms of, what does disability justice mean to you?
Yeah, well, first, I want to just send out so much appreciation and love and just like acknowledgement to the folks who actually um, coined the term. And that was, there's a disability justice collaborative that collective that actually came up with the tenets and just really thought out what this term would mean. And that includes people like Patty Byrne, Mia Mingus, which a lot of people get me confused with Mia Mingus. I am not Mia Mingus. I'm sorry if you came to see Mia Mingus. I know Mia Mingus is amazing, but I am not her. And Stacey Milgram, and rest in peace, Stacey. Uh, but disability justice came out of this collective idea from disabled queer women who came out and were just like, we do not see ourselves in movement spaces, particularly in the disability rights movement, and we need to see more of ourselves. We need to be able to see folks talking about people like us. And that was super powerful, particularly for other disabled, queer, women, people of color. And so they created these 10 tenets. But what's really important to understand is that disability justice incorporates an understanding that individuals live in intersectional lives, and that they live at this place where it's an understanding that all of these isms interact with each other to create these structures and these systems that aren't made for us, right? And that we have to create environments and communities that support one another, that are willing to collaborate and coalesce to fight back and to build power within our communities. So it's not just about, creating policies, but it's actually about empowering ourselves to build power within our own communities.
Thank you for drawing that distinction. Can you maybe provide folks with an example of what that could look like in kind of everyday life, or how we are actually could live out those values and live out the tenets of disability justice?
Yeah, you look at anything from, let me take something from history that people probably wouldn't realize, but the Black Panther movement is all about empowering a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's about building this infrastructure to build up a community that had been left behind for so long. And you can argue about the what they did right and what they did wrong, but part of that understanding within that community was to build power and to build a infrastructure within their community. And that is sort of like an essential part of understanding what disability justice actually means. So you look at, particularly during this pandemic, all this mutual aid support that has been created by communities. You look in, I believe it's, what ward 5? I'm not good with DC sort of communities, but I saw this one community that decided to create this whole system and to provide mutual aid within the community. And I look at my home state of North Carolina in Durham and how they created their own sort of mutual aid support programs that didn't question people's need. They just said, okay, you came to us saying you wanted support, we are going to provide it. We're not going to require you to provide documentation. We're not going to require you to jump through hoops and stuff like that. If you can provide support, provide support. If you need support, we'll give you support. These are the kinds of things that can be built that don't require permission from sources of power. So that's what sort of disability justice incorporates, is this idea that we can build infrastructure ourselves and that we can be our own heroes within our own systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, to your point about mutual aid, I know I live in Ward 8, and there's a East of the River Mutual Aid Collaborative that specifically organizes and supports folks in Ward 7 and 8, which is, east of the river, east of the Anacostia River. And so
that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've appreciated it because they've been able to support thousands of families with food, like equipment, like masks, so that they could also stay safe. Because also it's many of these communities who are also asked to still show up to jobs during the pandemic in person. And so I definitely want to lift up the efforts of examples of mutual aid in DC and across the country that have really served and supported and helped folks survive this pandemic, especially when the state and the government weren't necessarily doing their best in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So the next question, I want to ask you is, I at least as I've been learning more about disability justice and following and learning and engaging with folks with disabilities, that there's been, I've seen anyways, even in sometimes progressive movements, a lot of ableism, and that I've felt that combating ableism is a need that's growing, or at least I'm reminded of how much more work we have to do in this regard. Can you share a little bit more on some reflections on why is it important for more people to combat ableism, and how have you maybe experienced it or seen it show up even in sometimes progressive identified spaces?
Yeah, yeah. I think what folks really need to understand is ableism is much like in disability justice tenets, ableism is interconnected with so many of the other isms. You look at racism, you look at sexism, homophobia, any of these other systems of oppression, and it's interwoven with all of those. But it is also contextually, it is integral to the capitalist system, right? It is important in a capitalist system to continue ableism, because capitalism is the belief that there is a specific worth to your ability to work. So that is super important to understand. The whole system is rigged to create ableism and allow it to fester. So when we talk about why we want to fight back against ableism, it's because we understand how interconnected it is to all of these other sources of oppression. And if we don't fight back against this one in particular, it's going to allow all of these other systems to continue. And so when I am in spaces and I hear from particularly, progressive spaces who will come to me, and they'll make just like a very flippant remark about somebody that they don't like, somebody that they don't agree with, and they utilize ableism as a way to go against them. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, one, you are putting a specific worth on somebody's life based on your perception of their abilities. Mm-hmm. And how does that reflect to the communities that I belong to, right? And how do I reflect on that in saying that you don't see worth in my community? And even though you say, well, you're an exception to the rule, or I'm not talking about people like you, and I sit there and I think, no, you are. It's just you have so disconnected our plights, and you're willing to utilize ableism as a cudgel against individuals that you don't like, and how that perpetuates the systems of oppression. And it frustrates me so much, because I feel like it's a bit of a dance that I have to play with folks, with being able to say, look, like, I understand your frustration, and I understand that this system is shitty, and I understand that you are angry, but you cannot say that somebody is stupid or insane or crazy, because individuals utilize those terms to demean the disability community and actually incarcerate my community. Mm-hmm. And that does harm not only to my community, but communities around me, whether it's the immigrant community, whether it is Black and brown communities. And so that's why when I sit there and I am telling people that I am frustrated with their use of language, and that their beliefs in around mental health. Why I get so frustrated, because I can see how it specifically connects with all of the other work that they are doing, that they are trying to fight against.
Yeah, no, I point well taken. You know, because I think I'm reminded that words matter, words have impact, and even if we aren't aware of the impact it has, and how sometimes those words can also reverberate and mean other folks will think it's okay to use certain terms or language, and then how they then reinforce that's then reinforced by other folks echoing and using those same terms and languages. So I definitely agree. And I feel like I've been more mindful myself personally. This has been a growing edge for me around, you know, clearly I was raised and grew up in the system in a way that meant there's also a lot of unlearning I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, a
Yeah.
lot conversations and support of other folks to say, hey, actually, what you're saying or what you just said is not appropriate, or there are other different ways to communicate or articulate what you're trying to say, because, you know, and to help them understand why some of those things, and including some of the examples you gave, aren't necessarily that they're harmful, and there's other ways that aren't harmful to be able to describe their feelings or describe other people or situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times I talk to folks and I say, like, look, the people that have, particularly when we talk about mental health and we talk about crazy or insane, and I see people use it over and over again, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, what if you had a sibling who was struggling with their mental health, and they felt like they couldn't talk to you because you equated crazy or insane as bad and negative, or you were telling individuals that, because this individual is crazy, quote unquote crazy, that they should be locked up or something like that. How would that individual feel about talking to you? And I will say, I'm not perfect. I sometimes slip into it because, as you said, we grew up in a society that was okay with it. But a lot of things that I think about in comparison as a queer person is like, that's so gay, right? Or something like that, or using those slang terms, particularly while I was growing up. And I remember when I realized that that was not a great term, what I would often do is switch the term to, oh, that's happy, and then realizing, oh, maybe that's not the right term for me, because, a long time ago, gay meant happy. And so the way that I used to correct my brother when he used that term was, oh, so you're happy. And he would sit there and be like, no, that's not what I meant. And I was like, what did you actually mean? And he'd be like, this is what I meant. And I was like, okay, that's a good way to switch your language. So I think there's ways to, like, figure out sort of like, how can you be more precise with your language, right? Because we are all often super imprecise with our language, which can cause harm to others.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, the next question I want to ask you, Mia, is around, you know, so we talked about you founding the Disability Caucus for the Women's March. Can you talk a little bit can you tell us the story or what inspired you to found the caucus, and yeah, share a little bit more about that
Yeah. Uh, I would like to be able to say, oh, this was super intentional and I was like point A to point B and I knew exactly what I was doing. But I'm going to be real with you. It was 100% sort of like things fell in place. And I was lucky enough to take up those opportunities. And so what kind of happened was that I was at the time working at UNC Chapel Hill as a research assistant, and was just feeling really disillusioned in my work and really wanting to figure out ways to help communities. And I had left vocational rehabilitation because I had been frustrated in that work. And when Trump came into office, that night I was just reflecting on sort of all the communities that were going to be affected. I mean, they're already affected, but how much that was going to amplify the issues that were happening in our communities. And just sort of committed to myself that I was going to do more community organizing. I'd done that a little bit in college and had sort of dabbled in it before, but had just like made this promise to myself. And so the first thing that came up on my Facebook page was somebody saying, hey, we should do a women's march. And I was like, hey, that's a great thing to commit myself to for the next 3 months or something like that. And, started contacting different people to try and see if I could get involved, and hadn't heard anything. But at the same time, I was seeing people, disabled people in the community saying, hey, what about disability? What about disability? Are you going to be accessible? Have you thought about issues in the disability community? And nobody was hearing back from them. And I was just reflecting on my own experiences at marches and being like, man, that really is an issue. And, nobody is listening to our community. We have a lot of issues, and we're going to be an extreme threat when Trump comes into office. What can I do? And so that's when I was like, well, why don't I use the collective, bargaining principles and get a bunch of people together and see if we can push the national committee to do something and to think about accessibility. And so I just talked to a bunch of people in the disability community, and they were all like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, okay, great. So then I did some Facebook stalking and found the people that I need to contact on the national committee, and just spent the next couple weeks just sending out email after email after email saying, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Until somebody actually got back to me and was like, hey, my son has diabetes. I'd love to talk to you. I'm really interested in what you're talking about. And that's sort of how I got involved. It kind of whirlwind into this creating a caucus and being able to adjust the principles for the march, and to create a specific sort of guide to how to do accessible marches, which has been utilized over and over again in other events, including being utilized by presidential campaigns. And so it's sort of amazing how it's like just like a small idea or small action can sort of snowball into something with such impact.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious, I imagine when you were organizing the Women's March and putting together the Disability Caucus, it was a different political climate, right? Trump was elected. People were trying to figure out what that meant. To your point around, of course, there was issues already happening, but there was a question or wonder about how much worse situations might be for folks, especially the most marginalized and oppressed amongst us. Clearly he wasn't reelected. And I think people are in this place, or at least have been in this place this year of like, well, we no longer have Trump in office. What does that mean for our work now? How, like, what do you share? What do you offer? What can you share with folks who are questioning or wondering that if they should still be involved after maybe being politicized or being involved for the first time in response to some of Trump's policies? And why is it important to sustain that engagement?
Yeah, it's funny because I did this. I studied sociology in undergrad, and that was sort of where I became politicized and got the critical race theory sort of taught to me, it's interesting to see it pop up now because it's been around for so long. is that these issues have been there and they're going to continue to be there. And the biggest wariness that particularly the most marginalized communities have, particularly for more affluent, more white communities, is how bought are you? How bought into the organizing are you?
Mm.
And are you just going to be sort of, uh, it sounds weird, but like a fair weather sort of organizer? Or are you going to be somebody that's down to organize through into affinity, because these issues are going to continue to be there, right? And so just because you see the threat against yourself and that threat ends to you doesn't mean that it's ended for all the other people that have been doing the work for infinity, right? And I think, yes, a lot of people are tired, and I totally understand that. 4 years plus a pandemic is awful. But think about the communities who have been in this for so much longer and who have been dealing with oppression for so much longer. And think about how tired they are. And if you can provide that one extra voice in the mix, and if you can provide that one extra hour to give somebody else a break, then you need to take that opportunity and actually be a quote unquote ally or comrade, and really stick through it, because that work is needed, and that work is going to continue to be needed. You think of anything from, particularly with this pandemic, disabled people, Black and brown disabled people, particularly immigrants, all of them are still struggling and still trying to get their voices heard. And these issues haven't let up just because we have a new administration. And while we have a friendlier administration, that doesn't mean we can't speak out against the things that are happening in our communities. And so, when I think about the pandemic, particularly, I think about, the Supreme Court just stated that it was okay for this quote unquote treatment center to shock individuals with disabilities if they behaved poorly or they didn't behave normally, right? The Judge Rottenberg Center that is allowed to use shock therapy as a way to punish the individuals who are there. And those individuals are mostly Black and brown disabled individuals. And so these issues, they haven't gone away. And we need to stick at it. We need to keep going, and if we let off the gas, the other groups are going to come in and they're going to take our rights away.
So, I guess a follow-up question to that, Mia, is what keeps you motivated? What keeps you grounded? I imagine there's the work, ebbs and flows. There's, of course, highs and lows. And through it all, how do you stay rooted? How do you continue to press forward?
Yeah, I think just seeing all the other people who are doing the work, even when I get tired and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just don't have the brain space or the spoons to continue on. I see these other individuals who are just at it, who are just working, and who are just doing amazing work within their communities. And that helps me understand, like, I gotta stick to this. I gotta continue on. I gotta keep doing it. And I think even seeing the smallest wins, helps me get to the next next win, and the next win, and the next win. And I think it's really important for us to figure out little ways to celebrate ourselves and the things that we do within our communities. And I think it's really important to understand that joy is, you know, it is something that to utilize in our work, um, and that it shows a resistance and a resilience against the forces that push back against us.
Absolutely. Finding joy, I think is an important part. And it's also how I got through this pandemic. And my hope
Yeah,
is
your dancing TikToks.
I'm trying to be like you when it comes to TikTok, Mia. Your TikTok content is amazing. If you don't follow Mia already, follow Mia on Instagram and TikTok. Some of the best content. And I truly enjoy it. It definitely brings me joy. So please follow Mia if you aren't already. Um, if it's okay, Mia, I want to just shift us a little bit to another topic. I talked about you being a transracial adoptee. And for those who maybe aren't familiar with transracial adoption, can you tell people about it
Yeah,
and how that has shaped your dedication to activism and organizing?
yeah, definitely. I'm so angry that the term transracial has been uh, there's been a co-option of our term in the adoptee community. Um, but transracial adoption, that term, has an actual sort of history to it, because individuals who have been taken from their communities, their culture, which are usually marginalized communities, and sort of sent to sort of white majority communities. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's another minority community. That's what we call transracial. It's a when you are adopted away from a community, a culture, a racial and ethnic culture, than your family. And so it has a long history, and sort of goes all the way back towards, when indigenous tribes in North America were taken from their families and put into these boarding schools, and sort of sold into white homes, to be sort of assimilated. Um, all of this, you know, the historical ramifications, and means that you have been sort of stripped from your ancestral culture and community. So I think for me, understanding sort of that historical lens of, my family, which was Korean, South Korean, and the fact that, transracial or transnational adoption was created because of the freaking Korean War, and the fact that, these children were being displaced, and that these white soldiers were deciding to take these children from these communities and putting them into the United States. I think that provided me sort of an understanding of how history sort of colors your own life story, right? And it made me understand the the areas that I have such privilege, and also the areas that I have lost through trauma. Um, and, you know, I think that for the longest time, I've felt super split between being very grateful in the fact that I have a very loving family, but also understanding the trauma of losing my own culture and my own ancestry, because of just sort of this brutal history of taking folks from marginalized communities and assimilating them into Western culture. I think that, I continue to like process what that means for me as an individual and where I am in the spectrum of all of these different structures. But I think I've also always understood that I am at a very privileged place in my life, and that means that I want to make sure that I am, reaching out to individuals who don't have that privilege and making sure that I can uplift their work and um, their stories and issues. Um, I know that was kind of a windy way, but yeah, I think it just shows like I'm continuing to process this and figure out sort of what it means in the context of my own life.
For sure. No, thank you for your vulnerability, your willingness to even share your experience and the arc of that experience and the ongoing processing that that you're still doing. And and I think it's an important part to understand that like we are all very complex and are some of our experiences leading up to that moment. And so it's important, I think, for me, and part of why I asked was so that more people will understand or at least have a framework or a perspective on transracial adoption. And so that they could also figure out how to be better allies and co-conspirators and comrades in movement. Because I feel like I've been blessed to kind of see more and more transracial adoptees share their stories. I know I've seen recent campaigns to talk about justice for transracial adoptees too. So wanted to just also name that and just thank you for how you continue to inspire and pave the way and create space for more folks to be a part of movement and be a part of communities.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I want folks to take back with them around that is that we are just not a monolith at all. You
Mm-hmm.
can, I mean, I have seen the spectrum of adoptees of, individuals who are rightfully angry at the system. Um, and are very vocal about it. And then you see on the other spectrum individuals who are very grateful for the opportunities that they've been given. I think it's really just important to understand the historical lens of why there is this huge population of transracial adoptees. And it's through colonization, it's through militarization. And sure, there may be individuals who are extremely grateful for the opportunities that they are given. I'm somewhere in the middle, where I have a lot of these complex feelings, and I think it's a shame that so often our stories are often mistold, and showing us as like incomplete human beings or something like that. And I want people to understand that we are very complex and that we have very just wide variety of understandings of who we are and where we fit in the world, and that's okay, and should be respected.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I guess relatedly, but kind of as a way to kind of reflect back, if your current self could offer a piece of wisdom to your younger self, what would it be and why?
uh a couple of things.
Okay.
I think I, I'd say jokingly pace yourself. um, uh, you know, don't say yes to everything. I think that's always important, particularly for new advocates to do, is to understand that you can say no, and that's okay, and that you should be valued for yourself, and not just based on the amount of output of work that you do. So I would say that, but more seriously, I would say, um, that we should understand that our stories are our own, and that we should be as protective as possible with them, and that we shouldn't feel pressured to share our stories when we don't want to. I think that's really important, particularly for newer organizers, is that there is such a pressure for us, particularly as multi-marginalized individuals, to have to like spill our guts every time we come on mic, right? And we aren't good at the work that we do unless we spill our guts, right? And unless we make ourselves vulnerable every single time that somebody asks us to, right? And I've seen it time and time again that it causes more and more trauma to individuals, and that they feel like they are being marketed to the highest bidder for their story, right? And I particularly was thinking about this when Kavanaugh came up, and all of these women were being asked to share their traumatic stories. And I was thinking about just like how poorly we do at understanding like the effects that it has on people's mental health to have to share those stories, and not prepare for what the outcomes might be, and not providing that infrastructure and that support for individuals. We talk about DJI, right? And not creating that empowering environment for people to ensure that, like, if we did lose, which we did, that they didn't feel like they told their story for naught, right? And that we provided them outlets for when maybe things didn't go the way that we were hoping that they would go. So I think it's just really important to be protective of your story, not feel like you have to be pressed to tell it every single time, and being okay with saying, you know what, look, I'm not feeling it today, and feel free to chat with yada yada yada, or maybe you've talked to somebody else that is okay with you sharing their story, and utilizing that story, and always ask permission to share those people's stories, just FYI. But yeah, being okay with not having to tell your story every single time.
Absolutely. Yeah. What I got from what you were just saying, Mia, is for me, anyways, I'm taking that as like making and asserting boundaries. And that also includes when and how you tell your story, and when and how you tell how you may have been impacted. Because, you know, whether folks know it or not, it could spark, memories, spark feelings that are connected to that. So I definitely heard that. And then I also heard, like, in addition to protecting your story, is also like your time, and like what you give your energy and your joy to. And so I think very insightful wisdom, and I think the reminders that me and probably others definitely need. So thank you for that. So before going to my final two questions, I actually wanted to open it up to you to see if you have any questions that you wanted to ask of me.
Ooh, yeah. uh well, I'll ask a silly question, and then maybe I'll ask a more serious question.
Okay.
So, a silly question: what's your favorite dance move?
Ooh. Okay, so my favorite, so my favorite dance move, or at least the one that first came to mind, is a body roll.
Okay. Okay.
I feel like I'm still, I feel like there's different ways to do it, and you can either
Mm-hmm.
start from the top and go down, or you can go down and go up. And there's, of course, body rolls can look and feel different for different folks, and so I feel like people can have their own flares. So yeah, so I would say the body roll, because I feel like it's versatile, and lots of folks
Okay.
do it in different ways.
Okay. All right. Cool. Cool. That sounds good. A more serious question is, what inspires you to do the work?
Yeah. So first, I'll say that I am always inspired by my parents. who I know sacrificed a lot and who um, did the best that they could in the situation that they were given to provide for me and my sister. So I feel and continue to be inspired by them, to honor them and to kind of pay it forward, all the love and the care and the community that they offered to me and my sister. The other thing that I would say is that just broader community. The more that I'm able to meet and learn from and build with um, folks that live in my neighborhood, folks that are impacted by the issues that I care most about, by people who are trying to live their life every day, knowing that they have racism and ableism and homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia and other systems of oppression against them, but are finding ways to make it, are finding ways to still have so much joy. That for me is what keeps me going. And people like you, to be honest, Mia, who um, remind me of the importance of humanity and reminds me of the goodness in the world. And for me, that's how we'll continue to fuel folks, is by giving that back and giving that forward to more and more people.
Awesome. Awesome. Yay.
Those are awesome questions. Thanks, Mia. Um, so just a couple of final questions as we're getting to close out. The first question is, what are some exciting campaigns or projects that you're working on, and how can people support?
Oh, so right now, what we are doing is, and particularly in my work around disability justice, we're trying to do a review on mutual aid programs and sort of how they are or aren't able to adapt for purposes of the disability community. So that's a really exciting program or sort of piece that we're trying to work on right now, is figuring out, particularly around nutrition, sort of how we can make sure that we are addressing people's nutritional needs during the pandemic. So that's something that I'm super excited about, because we're going to be talking about people who have food sensitivities and people who have specific nutritional needs, and talking also about folks who are re-entering from jails and prisons, and how a lot of the systems aren't able to provide for their needs, and how we are seeing significant disabilities being exacerbated due to that. So I'm super excited about that. Hoping to be releasing that piece out in late September. But something that's like actually something that you can do in particular is we are working on trying to revitalize the supplemental security income program, which is an essential program for individuals with disabilities, because it provides basically a basic income for individuals who don't have enough work credits to be able to get something like Social Security. So it can help kids, it can help adults, it can help the elderly, seniors, and it provides just like this general income for individuals. Unfortunately, we haven't done anything with it since the 80s, and that was just upping the asset limit a little bit. We have the income amount, I believe, is around 700, a little over $700, which doesn't cover the median rental costs in any state. And so we're really trying to press Congress to pass the SSI revitalization bill, or to include it in the reconciliation package. So what we are using is the hashtag demolish disabled poverty to really push our folks in Congress. I love to call them Congress critters, congressional critters, or Hill critters. And telling them that they need to sign on or add it into the reconciliation program, because it really does essentially help particularly Black and Brown individuals. It helps women in particular. It helps children as well. It's just a fantastic program that has sort of withered on the vine. I think one thing that one of my heroes, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, talks about is, that policy is policy is her love language, and that that bad policy is violence, particularly to marginalized communities. And allowing this program to have withered on the vine really has created this essentially a cycle of poverty for disabled individuals.
Absolutely. And just to make sure I heard that correctly, the hashtag was
demolish disabled poverty.
Okay, awesome. That's right. Okay, so hashtag demolish disabled poverty. Get active, learn more, and thank you again, Mia. If you, like I mentioned earlier, if you're not already following Mia, please do so at SeeMiaRoll, SeemiaRoll, and you'll get educational content. You'll get some amazing and creative TikTok videos, and you'll get some pure joy. So please follow my dear comrade, movement mate, and friend, Mia. Thank you so much again for taking the time to have this conscious conversation with me. I also want to give a shout out to the Can't Stop Won't Stop accessibility coordinator, Melissa Kelly Colibri, a deaf coordinator who has coordinated our ASL interpretation today. And of course, thank you to Stephanie, who served as our interpreter. Of course, giving shout out to the access that we are wanting to provide for the Can't Stop Won't Stop programming.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Greg. I always love talking to you.
I'm looking forward to meeting up in person sometime in the near future. So look out for that. And
maybe we can do a TikTok video together, eh?
Ooh, look at you. That sounds like a great idea. I will definitely follow up on that idea with you. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Hope you found this conversation as inspirational as I have. And we'll be in touch, everyone. See you at the next Conscious Conversation.